All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is March 16th, 2026, Missile Monday. And I have this article from the BBC, and it says, UK must build own nuclear missiles, says Lib Dems. So I'm just going to go into this article and bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And it says, Liberal Democrats leader Sir Ed Davey is calling on the government to start building a fully independent British nuclear deterrent to end the UK's reliance on the US. And as you can clearly see, yet again, another one of America's allies, looking to get their own nuclear arsenal. They can't depend on that for help. First was Japan. They question on whether or not the U.S. will have their back, in the time of war. Then Germany, because they, asked the U.S. for help, but never got an answer. So what do? They sought to get, nuclear help from either France or the UK. And now you have the UK, looking to, which they do have their own nuclear arsenal, but they're looking to depend on themselves rather than depending on Babylon, So this goes to show you that, America's allies are starting to turn against this place, So continuing, it says the UK has operational control of its nuclear arsenal, including British-built warheads, but it depends on the U.S. to supply and maintain the Trident missiles that would deliver them. Sir Ed told the BBC, when we've got presidents in the White House like Donald Trump, totally unreliable, I don't think we can have our nuclear deterrent dependent on the mood at breakfast of the person in the Oval Office. The government said the UK had a deep, long-standing relationship with the US and played a key part in the security of NATO. Slucky is man. Oh my God. Okay. Right there. Slakia are these ads. So it says the UK was the third country in the world after the US and Russia to develop nuclear bombs, which were initially carried by a fleet of RAF aircraft. Since the 1960s, the UK has built and maintained a fleet of submarines armed with American-built missiles under a technology-sharing agreement with the US, which are continually at sea. The Prime Minister has control over when to fire the missiles, but Britain's nuclear arsenal is part of NATO's defense shield. Sir Ed set out his agreement in a speech to his party's spring conference in New York on Sunday, saying the UK's continued reliance on US support is an unacceptable risk to national security. Sir Ed told the conference, Britain's nuclear deterrence must be genuinely, verifiably ours, not dependent on Trump or whoever his successor may be. Trump has proven we can't rely on America as a dependable ally. So yet again, man, now the UK is questioning America's, reliability or their dependability, to have their back. It says, as the UK now prepares to replace Trident in the 2040s, which we know these nukes aren't going to be around for another, you know, it's 2026, so let's just say another 15 to 20 years. They're not going to be around that long, because again, the way things are going now, it may be this year, next year, or just being realistic, possibly within the next 2 years. But again, the way things are going, hell, it could be sometime next year, but we just have to wait and see. It says, I'm going to continue right there. It says, as the UK now prepares to replace Trident in the 2040s, we should make the decision now to spend the billions required over the next 2 decades here in the UK, not in the US. Britain has the best scientists, the best engineers, the best builders in the world. So let's get building on our own. Truly independent nuclear deterrent here in the UK. Speaking to the BBC's Sunday with Laura Koonsberg program earlier, Sir Ed added, if we start now, we can be in a place where we control the missile technology ourselves and spend the billions that's going to cost not in the United States, but here in the UK. In a response, Ministry of Defense spokesperson said, our independent nuclear deterrent protects us every minute of every day and is the ultimate guarantee of our national security. They added, as the 2025 Strategic Defense Review made clear, a modernized nuclear deterrent will remain the cornerstone of the UK's defense and our commitment to NATO and global security. The Lib Dems have not provided an estimate of the cost of their proposal, which would far exceed the billions being spent on the planned replacement for the Trident. France, the only other European country with nuclear weapons, has always maintained a fully independent system. The Lib Dems say France's approach proves a sovereign British capability is achievable. The French missile program in the 1970s is estimated to cost around 20 billion euros in today's money, and the party says this cost will be split over 2 decades. They argue it could be done in 2 stages, developing a way to maintain the existing Trident weapons system domestically, and in the longer term, manufacturing a fully British-made replacement. The party has traditionally been split on the issue of Britain's nuclear weapons. Many in the party have campaigned for multilateral disarmament, something party sources insist they still believe in, while they must reflect on the reality of the global situation. So, yeah, man, as you can see right now, as it stands, Japan, Germany, and now the UK, they're all, they're all falling back on America because, again, they clearly see that America is not going to have their back because in reality, they're not. America isn't going to have the back of its allies, because the only nation that America is going to back is, the, is the land of Canaan. And those should know what the land of Canaan is, where Amalek dwells. And if you don't know what Amalek is, it's the Jays, the little hats, tiny tops, whatever you want to call them, the imposters. That's the only people or the only nation that America is going to defend. In reality is them, but the UK is just going to be one of the many nations or one of America's allies that is going to turn on this place and shoot missiles over here as well, because again, just like it says in Revelation, the 17th chapter, the nations, they're going to be angry at this place, which I'm going to grab that, but they're going to be angry. America's allies are going to turn on this place. And again, the whole world is angry at America and the imposters right now, man. The whole world is angry, especially at the imposters, with the situation that happened here in Bloomfield. It's either West Bloomfield or Bloomfield is one of them because they're right next to each other. But still, in Bloomfield, Michigan, where that synagogue was, you have Amalek yet again, playing the victim, which no one was hurt. But still, now they're pushing that narrative that, this individual, his family was, killed during, the bombing of Iran. And he took his anger out on just come on, man. It's just a mess. But either way it goes, the UK, Britain in particular, is going to turn on America. And as you can see, this is the updated or a photo of, them firing an unarmed Trident II missile or a D5. So they're looking to replace them. When rich, they're going to use America's own technology against them, because America does have nukes over there in Britain. So I'm just going to bring out a few scriptures. Didn't want to make this one too long, but I'm also going to leave that article, in the description box for those that want to check it out. So I'm going to start with the book of Revelation, chapter 11 and verse 14. And it says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And right, as we know, there's 3 woes spoken of in the Bible. That first woe being World War I, the second woe being World War II, and the third woe being World War III, which we're on the verge of seeing, and as we know or should know by now that, World War III isn't going to, go into full force until, the mark of the beast, which is the RFID microchip, is made mandatory, which again, that prophecy is coming, extremely soon, because again, they're still getting, the people, ready to use this technology. This is why they're getting all of this particular things ready, the 6G, they're getting that ready. For what? So that everything could be connected to the internet, But before, again, that war takes place, or this last and final war takes place, that has to be fulfilled, But again, the point being is that, that third woe is indeed coming quickly, and we can see it with this conflict that America and the imposters are having with the Iranians, and right now the American military is they're having a very hard time, dealing with them, man, because again, we have to remember that Iran, they're the Persians. They changed their name, I forget the exact years, either 1935 or 1938 is one of those years. But either way, they changed their name from Persia to Iran, but they're still the Persians, which go back to Elam, the so-called East Indians. That's who they are. And if you know about, the Persians, that they've always had, a great army. They're not an easy nation to conquer. And we can clearly see that today with the U.S. military going over there, and they're dead, man. They getting their ass handed to them, man. It's real. So don't be deceived. America is not that great nation that it once used to be. These other nations are not afraid of America anymore. So I'm gonna get the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 16, and it says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire." And right, all of America's allies are going to turn on her. Again, as we know, Britain is one of America's allies. So Britain, because it's looking like it's taking place now, with this article that I just read, man, because they don't want to, depend on the U.S. anymore for nuclear deterrence. They want to build their own nuclear arsenal. Just like a couple years ago, Japan, they wanted to build their own nuclear arsenal, But if I'm not mistaken, Japan, I have to look it up again, but Japan either does or does not. If they don't, then, they're not one of the current armed nuclear nations, but Britain is one of those nuclear armed nations, currently. But they want missiles of their own because the nukes that they have now, they're all U.S. made, because again, the U.S. has nukes placed in these different NATO nations, and when that time looks like you, and when that time comes, again, these different nations, they're going to turn on America. Britain is just being one of many, because we already know America's enemies, they're going to nuke this place, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, these different nations that are angry at this place, along with America's allies, they're going to be angry. The NATO and EU nations, that are in league with America, they're going to turn on her as well. All of these different nations are going to shoot their nukes over here and aid in that destruction, and that's just on a small scale. We know that on a much larger scale, our Lord Yahweh Shai, along with the angels, are going to destroy this place, and this is what we're patiently waiting for. But still, it's very exciting to see, man, because again, this place is going down, man. Babylon, like it says in Jeremiah 51, Babylon is not healed, There's no healing in this place because, I went to the gas station earlier, man. And what, like I said, I personally, I have to get premium gas for my vehicle. I have to get premium, and I went to one gas station in the city where I reside. At this particular gas station that I went to, it was $3.99. Before gas went up, it was $3.99. Then it shot up to $4.29. Then I had to go and get gas, while I was out before I came home, this morning, and premium gas was $4.79, man. So this war that is going on between, the imposters and the American military and Iran, is affecting America, because gas prices are really only being affected here, So again, even regular gas prices here in Michigan, because, it may vary from state to state, but here in Michigan, right now, regular gas is, $3.49, because like I said, premium gas can vary from whichever city, we go to. But again, since, this war has been going on, gas has increased. So again, regular gas is $3.49. Premium, as it stands right now, is $3.79 or $4.79. So again, America is being affected by this. And then, if the cost of fuel goes up, everything else is going to be affected as well, So let's get the book of Malachi, chapter 4 and verse 1. And it says, "For behold, the day that cometh shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." And right, the day that cometh that shall burn as an oven is talking about World War III, which we're seeing, gear up right now, because just like it says in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, in verse 8, we're in a time of war, That's the time that we're in right now, man. And you have to be crazy to, deny or delusional, I'll say, not even crazy. You have to be delusional to say that we're not in a time of war right now. Because just like it says, in Matthew, the 24th chapter, in verse 6, what? That we should hear of wars and rumors of wars, right? Because again, even though you don't hear about it as much, Russia is still at war with Ukraine. China is still at war with Taiwan. The the Israelis, they're at war with Iran, and possibly even still with Palestine. But right now, as it stands with Iran, this is all we're hearing about, man. Wars and rumors of wars. And World War III, even though it's technically already started, but it won't be official until Russia and America are directly involved and at war with each other, because they're the two main nations that are going to be against each other during this war, So that's the day that's coming. And it's not going to be how traditional warfare was fought. So let's get that in the book of Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 5. And it says, "For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire." And right, man, this coming Third World War is going to be like how traditional warfare was fought, where you will have one nation, excuse me, Slakia, where you have one nation of men on one side of the battlefield and another nation of men on the other side of the battlefield, charging each other in the center, going at it, having different weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bow and arrows, those different weapons of war, going. It says, "But they shall be burning and fuel of fire," man, meaning this coming Third World War is going to be fought with these nuclear missiles. That's why there are so many of them on the earth today, because they're all going to be used, And as I always make mention, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other. But again, that's primarily how World War III is going to be fought, by way of this nuclear technology, because those ground troops are going to be fighting over there in the east, in the region of Saudi Arabia. They once they get sent over there, they're not coming back. They're going to die. I was going to grab a couple more. Let's get the book of Isaiah chapter 54 and verse 16. It says, "Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals and the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And they have created the waster to destroy." And indeed, man, the modern day smith would be these scientists and physicists that are behind creating these nuclear weapons. A prime example would be, Julius Robert Oppenheimer, aka the father of the atomic bomb. He was a part of the Manhattan Project. He also had a hand in, the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, So he would be considered a smith, because he helped to develop these nuclear weapons, because that's what a blacksmith does. They create weapons of war, and that's what these scientists and physicists are doing. They're creating weapons of war, and not just any old weapons of war, man. These are weapons of mass destruction, because these nuclear missiles that are on the earth today have the capability of literally destroying the planet Earth. But as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever. So, the planet Earth is always going to be here. It's not going to be destroyed, but just certain lands are going to be destroyed. And as it stands, America, aka Babylon the Great, is going to be completely destroyed, pursuing to Isaiah, the 34th chapter, which gives a very vivid description of how this land is going to look after that fire dies down. No man will ever dwell here, but what? Only desert creatures, and the land of Israel will get hit, because again, Israel will be destroyed, but it will have to be built back up, man. Because right now, just like it says in the scriptures, our land will be trodden under the foot of the Gentiles. Because what? You have the Ishmaelites, which are the Arabs, and you have Amalek, which, the little hats, the imposters over there, in our land, fighting over a land that's not even theirs, so our land has to be cleansed because Pink City, it shouldn't be a such thing as Pink City over there, man. It shouldn't. But what? Just like it says in Job 9:24, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked, and we can clearly see that. So America is going to be destroyed. Israel is going to be destroyed, but America is going to be left desolate. Israel will be built back up, man, because again, our Lord is going to take us back to our land, and every nation of people, after they serve their 1,000-year captivity, will eventually get their own lands again, So I'll end it with the book of Revelation, chapter 9, and verse 15, and it says, "And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men." And indeed, when you read in Revelation, the 7th chapter, it mentions the 4 angels, which these are 4 literal angels that are holding back the 4 winds. The 4 winds representing, the destruction that is going to take place on the earth, in particular, World War III, because there is a set time when this war is going to take place, when the Heavenly Father wants this war to take place. It's the reason it says this particular hour, day, month, and year when it's going to be, unleashed, There's a set time, and it's going to happen, right after these last couple prophecies come to pass, And it says, "For to slay the third part of men," because you have 3 classes of men on the earth. Today, you have the sons of God, which today are known as the biblical Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the tribe of Judah, all the way down to the tribe of Issachar. And you have the sons of men, which are, the different heathen nations. And you have the sons of the wicked, which are the Edomites, so-called white people. You're the third part of men. And this coming destruction is for you, And you will have 2/3 of the nation of Israel that will get caught up in this destruction. Just like it says in Jeremiah chapter 13 and verse 8, that 2 parts, meaning 2/3 of the nation, 2/3 of the nation of Israel are going to be cut off, and die. And you different heathen nations that aren't able to return to your homelands, before this coming destruction, you're just collateral damage. You're just over here to make your little money and die, man. You're not that important. But again, this destruction is for you Edomites, man, because you're the third part of men. You're the vile man. You're the nation of people that is destroying the planet Earth. So you're going to be taken out of power the same way you came into power, by way of violence, So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say Shalom.